Derek stood on top of the table, champagne dripping from his expensive suit, shouting to the entire bar that he was finally free from the dead weight. He thought winning the divorce was his crowning achievement. He thought stripping his quiet, humble wife of every penny was a masterstroke of business genius. He truly believed he was untouchable. But he forgot one rule. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the calm before the storm. He didn't know that the man in the corner, the one he'd mocked for wearing grease-stained overalls for years, was actually the one holding the leash to his entire life. When the truth came out, Derek didn't just lose his money, he lost his reality. The ink on the decree absolute was barely dry, but Derek Caldwell was already 3 bottles of Dom Perignon deep into his celebration. He sat in the VIP booth of the Gilded Cage, the most pretentious club in downtown Seattle, surrounded by his boys, a group of junior executives who hung on his every word like he was a prophet of finance. "I'm telling you, it was too easy," Derek laughed, loosening his silk tie. He slapped the leather folder on the table. "She didn't even fight for the house. She just sat there, eyes on the floor, signing whatever my lawyer put in front of her. It was pathetic, honestly. Man, you really cleaned her out?" Greg, a slick-haired yes-man from accounting, asked with a grin. "Cleaned her out? I scrubbed the floor with her," Derek sneered. "I kept the penthouse, the Tesla, the offshore accounts, and the portfolio. I gave her the old Honda and her grandmother's antique furniture. You know, the junk that smells like mothballs." The table erupted in laughter. Derek leaned back, feeling the buzz of alcohol and pure, unadulterated arrogance. He felt lighter. For 5 years he had been married to Audrey. She was sweet, kind, and undeniably beautiful. But in Derek's eyes, she was low stock. She was a librarian who liked baking and quiet nights in. She didn't fit the image of the power couple Derek needed to ascend to the CEO position at Stratton Oakmont Holdings. He needed someone sharp, someone ruthless, someone like Chloe. Chloe slid into the booth next to him, her red dress leaving little to the imagination. She was the vice president of marketing at his firm, ambitious, loud, and expensive. Everything he thought he wanted. "Are we toasting to the end of the librarian era?" Chloe purred, clinking her glass against his. "To the end of mediocrity," Derek declared, kissing her deeply in front of everyone. "And to the beginning of the Caldwell dynasty. The real one." Derek checked his watch, a Rolex Submariner he'd bought specifically for this day. "Tomorrow, I walk into the board meeting as a single man, unburdened by a wife who thinks a big night out is a book club. I'm going to pitch the merger, get the promotion, and by this time next year, I'll be running the whole damn city." He truly believed it. He had spent months hiding assets, manipulating bank statements, and gaslighting Audrey into believing the marriage failed because she wasn't supportive enough. He had crushed her self-esteem so thoroughly that she hadn't even hired a lawyer. She had used a court-appointed mediator. "What about her dad?" Greg asked, pouring another round. "Didn't you say he was some kind of blue-collar nightmare?" Derek rolled his eyes. "Harrison, please. The guy is a mechanic. He spends his life under the hood of 1990s Fords. He came to the house once to fix the sink and tracked oil on my Persian rug. I told Audrey, keep that grease monkey away from me. He's harmless, probably crying into a cheap beer right now." Derek stood up, raising his glass high. "To Harrison. May he enjoy fixing radiators while I enjoy his daughter's alimony payments. Oh wait, there aren't any." The laughter was deafening. Derek felt like a king. He didn't notice the waiter standing in the shadows near the service entrance, holding a tray with white-knuckled grip, listening to every word. and he certainly didn't notice the text message that the waiter sent a moment later. "He's bragging, sir. It's worse than you thought." 3 weeks earlier, the scene had been very different. The mediation room was cold, smelling of stale coffee and lemon polish. Audrey sat on one side of the long mahogany table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple beige cardigan and jeans. No makeup. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red, but dry. Derek sat opposite her, flanked by 2 lawyers in shark grey suits. He was checking emails on his phone, barely looking at her. "Mrs. Caldwell," the mediator said gently, "I want to ensure you understand the terms. You are waiving your right to spousal support. You are relinquishing claim to the marital home at 40C 400 Highland Drive. You are accepting a one-time cash settlement of $10,000. Given the duration of the marriage and Mr. Caldwell's income, this is highly unusual. I strongly advise you to seek independent counsel." Audrey looked up. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. "I just want it to be over." Derek smirked without looking up from his phone. "She knows she didn't contribute to the estate," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Audrey is a realist. She knows she lived a lifestyle she couldn't afford on a librarian's salary. She's just correcting the market value." The mediator frowned at Derek. "Mr. Caldwell, please." He turned back to Audrey. "Audrey, are you sure? You have rights." Audrey took a deep breath. She looked at Derek, really looked at him. She saw the man she had loved since college. She remembered when he was a struggling intern and she paid his rent. She remembered when he was sick with the flu, and she sat up for 3 nights straight to cool his fever. She remembered how, as soon as he got his first bonus, he stopped coming home for dinner. She saw the contempt in his eyes. He didn't just want to leave her, he wanted to win. He wanted to destroy her to validate his own ego. "I'm sure," Audrey said, her voice steadying. "I don't want his money. I don't want the house. I just want my name back." Derek scoffed. "Gladly." "Caldwell is a brand. It needs protection." Audrey reached for the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She signed the papers with a fluid, practiced motion. Audrey Bennett. As they left the building, Derek stopped her on the steps of the courthouse. It was raining, a dreary Seattle drizzle. "You know," Derek said, buttoning his trench coat, "I almost feel bad for you. You're 32, no money, no husband, moving back in with your daddy. It's pathetic, Audrey. Really." Audrey looked at him, raindrops catching in her eyelashes. For the first time in months, a small, sad smile touched her lips. "You always talked too much, Derek," she said softly. "You never learned to listen." "Listen to what?" he snapped. "You never had anything interesting to say." "Goodbye, Derek. I hope it was worth it." She walked away, getting into her rusted 2015 Civic. Derek watched her go, shaking his head. "Loser," he muttered, then pulled out his phone to call Chloe. "It's done. Book the table at the Gilded Cage." He didn't see where Audrey went. She didn't drive to the rundown apartment complex he assumed she was renting. She drove 20 miles north, past the city limits, past the suburbs, winding up into the prestigious Hidden Hills Estates. She pulled up to a massive iron gate, flanked by security cameras. She rolled down her window and typed a code into the keypad. The gates swung open silently. She drove up a mile-long driveway, lined with ancient oak trees, finally stopping in front of a sprawling, modern mansion that made Derek's penthouse look like a broom closet. A man was waiting on the porch. He was older, in his 60s, wearing worn-out denim overalls and holding a wrench. His hands were stained with grease, but his posture was straight as a steel beam. It was Harrison Bennett. Audrey stepped out of the car and collapsed into her father's arms. "Is it done?" Harrison asked, his voice a deep rumble. "It's done, Dad," she whispered. "He took everything. He thinks he won." Harrison stroked her hair, his eyes hardening as he looked out over the estate he had built with his own 2 hands, not from fixing cars, but from owning the factories that built them. "Let him think that," Harrison said darkly. "A man who looks at the wrapper and ignores the chocolate deserves to starve. He doesn't know who he just declared war on." The Monday morning after the divorce party, Derek Caldwell strutted into the headquarters of Stratton Oakmont Holdings like he owned the building. In his mind, he practically did. He was the senior director of acquisitions. His numbers were up 20% this quarter. He had just shed the dead weight of his marriage. Today was the quarterly board meeting. Rumor had it that the CEO, an elusive figure named Mr. Sterling, who rarely showed his face, was stepping down, and they were announcing the successor. Derek had spent 3 years grooming the board members, taking them to golf trips, buying them dinners. He was a shoo-in. He walked into the conference room. It was a glass-walled aquarium of power. The long table was occupied by the heavy hitters of the industry. Chloe was there, winking at him from the marketing corner. "Good morning, everyone," Derek said, taking his seat at the head of the table. A bold move, but he felt bold. "I trust we're ready to discuss the future." "Actually, Derek," said Marcus, the current acting COO, "we're waiting for the chairman." Derek frowned. "The chairman? I thought Mr. Sterling was in Europe." "Mr. Sterling retired last week," Marcus said, looking uncomfortable. "The majority shareholder bought out his remaining stake. We have a new chairman of the board. He's here to restructure the leadership team." Derek felt a prickle of annoyance. New leadership? Why wasn't I told? But he quickly relaxed. Whoever it was, Derek would charm them. He was Derek Caldwell. He was undeniable. "Fine." Derek tapped his pen. "Let's get this over with. I have a merger to pitch at noon." The heavy oak doors at the end of the room opened. The room went silent. A man walked in. He wasn't wearing an Armani suit. He wasn't wearing a Rolex. He was wearing a simple, clean, navy blue button-down shirt and grey slacks. He looked like a grandfather who had just come from a hardware store. But the way he walked, slow, deliberate, heavy, commanded absolute silence. Derek's jaw dropped. He blinked, sure he was hallucinating. It was the mechanic. It was Harrison Bennett, Audrey's father. Derek let out a short, incredulous laugh. What is this? Is the air conditioning broken? Did someone call maintenance?" The room did not laugh. Chloe looked down at her iPad, her face pale. Harrison ignored Derek completely. He walked to the head of the table, the seat Derek had presumptuously taken. He stood there, looking down at Derek with eyes like cold flint. "You're in my seat, son," Harrison said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that vibrated in Derek's chest. "Harrison!" Derek stood up, his face flushing red. "What the hell are you doing here? Look, I know you're upset about the divorce, but you can't just wander into a secure building. Security!" Derek shouted towards the door. "Sit down, Derek!" Marcus hissed from across the table. "Shut up and sit down." "Why?" Derek sputtered, pointing at Harrison. "This guy fixes cars. He's a mechanic. He's trespassing." Harrison smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a trapped rabbit. "I do fix cars," Harrison said, addressing the room while keeping his eyes on Derek. "I love fixing cars. It keeps my hands busy and my mind clear. It's a hobby I picked up after I sold my first company, Bennett Logistics, for $300 million in 1998. Derek froze. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt dizzy. "Then," Harrison continued, walking slowly around the table, I got bored. So I started investing. Real estate, tech, and private equity. He stopped behind Chloe's chair. Chloe was trembling. I bought a 15% stake in this company 5 years ago, just a silent partner. I wanted to see how it was run. Harrison turned back to Derek. Then my daughter brought a young man home. You. You were ambitious, smart. I thought, maybe he's the one to take care of my Audrey. So I quietly increased my stake. I pushed for your hiring. Did you really think you got the director job at 28 because of your resume? You had 0 experience. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I bought your way in, Harrison said, his voice dropping to a growl. I gave you the career. I gave you the connections. I gave you the life you have, because I thought you loved my daughter. Harrison leaned forward, placing his grease-stained hands flat on the polished mahogany table. But then, I watched. I watched you treat her like a servant. I watched you cheat on her with... He gestured vaguely at Chloe. Staff. I watched you hide money. And finally, I watched you brag in a bar about leaving her with nothing. Harrison pulled a remote from his pocket and clicked it. The giant screen on the wall flickered to life. It was a video, grainy, shot from a cell phone in a dark bar. It was Derek, standing on the table at the Gilded Cage last night. I scrubbed the floor with her, gave her the old Honda. Keep that grease monkey away from me. The audio was crisp. Every arrogant, cruel word echoed in the silent boardroom. Harrison clicked the remote, freezing the video on Derek's laughing, drunk face. You wanted to clean house, Derek, Harrison whispered. Let's clean house. The silence in the boardroom was no longer just quiet. It was a physical weight, pressing down on Derek's chest, making it impossible to breathe. The freeze frame of his face on the giant monitor, mouth open in a drunken jeer, champagne glass raised, loomed over him like a tombstone. Derek looked around the table, desperate for an ally. Just minutes ago, these men and women were his peers, his admirers. Now Marcus was studying the grain of the wood on the table. Greg, the accountant who had laughed the loudest at the bar, was aggressively typing on his phone, likely trying to delete his text history with Derek. Chloe had pushed her chair back a few inches, physically distancing herself from him. This is... Derek stammered, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat, trying to summon the arrogance that had carried him this far. This is a violation of privacy. That video was taken in a private setting. It's inadmissible. And frankly, Harrison, it's petty. So I had a few drinks. So I vented about my ex-wife. That has no bearing on my ability to lead this company. My numbers speak for themselves. Revenue is up 20% in Q3 due to my aggressive acquisition strategy. Harrison watched Derek squirm with an expression of mild curiosity, like a scientist observing a bug under a microscope. He slowly walked over to the empty chair at the head of the table, the chairman's seat, and sat down. The leather creaked in the silence. Your numbers, Harrison repeated, his voice calm. Let's talk about your numbers, Derek, because you're right. Numbers don't lie. But people do. Harrison gestured to the woman sitting at the far end of the table. Derek hadn't noticed her before. She was severe-looking, with glasses perched on the end of her nose and a stack of files in front of her. This is Sarah Jenkins, Harrison introduced. She's the head of forensic accounting for Bennett Logistics. She's been auditing Stratton Oakmont's books for the last 6 months. Since I became the majority shareholder, I authorized a deep dive into the acquisitions department. Derek felt a cold sweat break out on his lower back. Sarah? Harrison nodded to her. Sarah opened a file and began to read, her tone monotone and lethal. Mr. Caldwell, regarding the acquisition of TechStream Solutions last November, You reported a purchase price of $14.5 million, however. The actual transfer of funds to the TechStream owners was $12.2 million. Consulting fees, Derek said quickly. Brokerage fees, it's standard. We traced the remaining $2.3 million, Sarah continued, ignoring him. It was routed through a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Obsidian Consulting. The sole signatory for Obsidian Consulting is a DC Holdings. That's you, isn't it, Derek? The room gasped. This wasn't just bad behavior. This was embezzlement. That's a lie, Derek shouted, standing up. That money was strictly for operational restructuring. We have the bank records, Derek, Harrison said, cutting through the noise. We have the IP addresses used to access the accounts. We have the emails you sent to your offshore banker, Mr. LeBlanc, instructing him on how to hide the transaction. You didn't just hide money from Audrey to win the divorce. You stole money from my company to fund the lifestyle you thought you deserved. Harrison picked up a thick document from the table and slid it across the mahogany surface. It stopped right at the edge, directly in front of Derek. This is your termination letter, Harrison said, for cause, gross misconduct, embezzlement, and fraud. You can't just fire me, Derek screamed, his composure completely shattering. I am the face of this department. The shareholders love me. The shareholders, Harrison corrected, are me, and I loathe you. Harrison turned his gaze to Chloe. She flinched as if she'd been slapped. And Ms. Summers, Harrison said softly. I didn't know, Chloe blurted out, standing up. Harrison, Mr. Bennett, I had no idea about the embezzlement. Derek kept me in the dark. I was just doing my job in marketing. I am a victim here too. Harrison chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. He clicked the remote again. The screen changed. It was an email chain. From Derek Caldwell to Chloe Summers. Subject, the exit strategy. Don't worry, babe. Once the divorce is finalized, I'll move the Cayman funds into the joint account. We'll buy the villa in Tuscany. Audrey gets nothing. The old man is clueless. Just make sure the marketing budget for Q4 is inflated to cover the tracks. Reply from Chloe Summers. Make sure you sign the papers before you book the flight. I don't want that librarian coming after half of our loot. Love you. Chloe's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. She sank back into a chair, covering her mouth with her hand. You knew, Harrison said. You helped him cook the books on the marketing side to hide the capital outflows. You're not a victim, Chloe. You're an accomplice. Harrison looked at the security guard standing by the door. He nodded. Escort Mr. Caldwell and Ms. Summers out of the building. They are not to return to their offices. Their personal effects will be boxed and mailed to them. If they touch a computer, arrest them. Two burly guards stepped forward. Derek looked at them, then at Harrison. His eyes were wild, desperate. He realized the game wasn't just over. The board had been flipped. You can't do this, Derek spat, pointing a shaking finger at Harrison. I'll sue you. I'll sue this entire company into the ground. I know where the bodies are buried, Harrison. You think you're clean? I'll ruin you. Harrison stood up slowly. He leaned over the table, his face inches from Derek's. You're welcome to try, son. But you should know, the lawyer you've been using? Brent Holloway? Derek blinked. What about him? He's on retainer for Bennett Logistics, Harrison whispered. I recommended him to you, remember? Through a friend. He's been forwarding me every email, every confession, every hidden asset strategy you sent him for the last year. He wasn't working for you, Derek. He was documenting the evidence. Derek's knees gave out. He grabbed the edge of the table to stop himself from falling. The betrayal was total. Every move he had made, every smart decision to hide money, every legal maneuver, it had all been watched, recorded, and allowed to happen, just so the trap could snap shut at the perfect moment. "Get him out of my sight," Harrison commanded, sitting back down and opening a file as if it were a normal Tuesday. As the guards dragged a screaming Derek and a sobbing Chloe out of the glass room, Harrison looked up at the remaining board members. They were terrified. "Now," Harrison said, putting on his reading glasses, "let's discuss the actual Q4 projections. And Marcus, if you check your phone one more time during a meeting, you can join them." Marcus dropped his phone onto the table instantly. The sidewalk outside the Stratton Oakmont building was cold and grey. Derek stood there, shivering in his suit jacket. They had taken his company badge. They had taken his company phone. They had even taken the keys to the Tesla, which, as it turned out, was leased under the corporate fleet account. Chloe was standing a few feet away, furiously typing on her own phone. "My passcodes aren't working," she shrieked. "Derek, they locked my bank account, the joint one we opened last week. It says, 'Account frozen. Federal investigation.'" "Shut up, Chloe," Derek snapped. He was trying to think. He needed liquid cash. He needed to get to the airport. He had a stash of cash in the safe at the penthouse. If he could just get there, grab the passports and the gold bars he'd bought off the books, he could get to Belize before the feds caught up. "I'm calling an Uber," Derek muttered. "We're going to the penthouse." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Chloe yelled. Passers-by were starting to stare. "You said you had it handled. You said your ex was stupid. You said her dad was a nobody mechanic. You ruined my career." "I made your career," Derek roared back. "You were a junior copywriter before I pulled you up. Get in the damn car." An Uber finally pulled up. Derek shoved Chloe into the back seat and jumped in. 4400 Highland Drive. Step on it. The ride was agonizing. Derek checked his personal phone. He had 17 missed calls from Brent, his lawyer. He ignored them. He didn't want to hear Brent's excuses. He didn't realize yet that Brent wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling to serve him. When they arrived at the luxury high-rise, Derek sprinted to the lobby. He ignored the concierge, a man named Philip, whom he usually tipped well to look the other way when he brought women home. "Mr. Caldwell," Philip called out, stepping out from behind the marble desk. "Sir, you can't go up there." "Out of my way, Philip," Derek growled, heading for the elevators. He slapped his key fob against the sensor. Nothing happened. A red light blinked. "Access denied." He slapped it again. "Access denied." "Sir," Philip said, looking uncomfortable. He signaled to the lobby security. "The locks were changed an hour ago. The lease on the penthouse was terminated." "Terminated? I own that apartment," Derek shouted. "I bought it 3 years ago." "Actually, sir," a voice came from the lounge area. Derek spun around. A man in a sharp pinstripe suit stood there holding a briefcase. It was a process server, not a lawyer. "Mr. Derek Caldwell?" the man asked. "Who are you?" "I'm serving you with a temporary restraining order and an eviction notice," the man said, handing Derek a thick stack of papers. "Also a summons for a civil suit regarding the ownership of Unit 44B. Derek ripped the papers open. His eyes scanned the legal jargon until he found the property owner's name. Property owner. The Audrey Bennett Trust. Derek felt the world spin. He had put the apartment in a shell corporation to hide it from taxes, thinking he was clever. He had signed the deed over to Blind Management to keep his name off public records. He hadn't bothered to check who the Blind Management firm was sold to last month. Harrison had bought the shell company, which meant Harrison, or rather, Audrey, owned the apartment Derek had been living in. "You have 24 minutes to collect essential personal items," the process server said, checking his watch. "Police escort is on its way to supervise. Anything purchased with marital funds or company funds stays. That includes the furniture, the electronics, the art, and the contents of the safe. "The safe?" Derek whispered. "How do you know about the safe?" "Mr. Bennet was very thorough in his audit." The man smiled politely. Chloe let out a scream of pure frustration behind him. "My jewelry is in there. My Cartier bracelet." "If it was purchased by Mr. Caldwell," the server said, "it is now considered evidence in the embezzlement investigation. You can file a claim, Miss Summers, but I wouldn't hold your breath." Derek sank onto one of the velvet lobby sofas. He had no car, no home, no job, no access to his money, and the police were coming. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, the atmosphere was very different. Audrey Bennet sat in the sunroom of her father's estate. The light was pouring in, illuminating the canvas she was painting. For years, Derek had told her painting was a waste of time and a childish hobby. She hadn't touched a brush in 4 years. Now she was painting a storm clearing over the ocean. She heard the heavy tread of her father's boots on the hardwood floor. Harrison walked in, holding 2 mugs of tea. He looked tired but peaceful. He had changed out of his suit back into his comfortable flannel shirt and jeans. "Here," he said, setting the mug down. "Chamomile." "Thanks, Dad." Audrey wiped a smudge of blue paint from her cheek. "How did it go?" Harrison sat in the wicker chair opposite her. He took a sip of tea. "It went as expected. He shouted. He blamed everyone else. He tried to run." "And the company?" "We'll survive. Stock might take a hit when the news of the embezzlement breaks, but we'll recover. Honesty pays better dividends in the long run." Audrey looked at her painting. "Do you think I was cruel, Dad? Letting him think he won? Letting him humiliate me in court?" Harrison leaned forward, his rough hands clasping hers. "Audrey, honey, you didn't let him do anything. You let him show the world who he really was. If you had fought him for the money, he would have dragged you through the mud for years. He would have hidden the assets better. He would have destroyed your spirit. By stepping back, by giving him the victory, you made him careless. Arrogance is a blindfold, and he tied it on tight." "He said I was pathetic," Audrey whispered, the memory of the courthouse steps still stinging. "He was looking in a mirror," Harrison said firmly. "Now there is one more thing." Harrison pulled a letter from his pocket. It wasn't a legal document. It was a handwritten note on thick, cream-colored stationery. "What's this?" "This," Harrison said, "is from the board of directors of the City Library Foundation. Apparently they're looking for a new director of archival history. It's a prestigious position. I might have made a donation to get their attention, but they looked at your resume, your real resume, the one Derek told you to hide, and they want to interview you on Thursday." Audrey's eyes widened. "Director? Dad, I haven't worked in 5 years." "You've been managing a narcissist for 5 years. Harrison smiled. "Running a library will be a vacation compared to that. You have your name back, Audrey. Now go get your life back." Audrey took the letter. Her hands were trembling, but this time it was with excitement. Back in the city, the flashing lights of a police cruiser reflected off the glass doors of the high-rise. 2 officers walked into the lobby. Derek Caldwell, once the king of the world, sat with his head in his hands, watching his custom-made Italian leather shoes, the only thing he technically still owned, rest on the cheap lobby rug. He looked up as the officers approached. "Derek Caldwell?" "Yes," he croaked. "We have a warrant for your arrest regarding wire fraud and grand larceny. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back." As the cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Derek looked over the officer's shoulder. On the TV screen in the lobby, the news was playing. It was a segment on the local business channel. The headline read, "Silent Partner Speaks. Harrison Bennett takes control of Stratton Oakmont, ousts corrupt leadership." The picture on the screen was of Harrison, looking strong and dignified, shaking hands with the mayor. Derek closed his eyes. He realized then that he hadn't just lost a game. He had been a pawn in a game he didn't even know was being played. "Come on, let's go," the officer said, guiding him toward the door. Derek stepped out into the rain. It was the same dreary Seattle drizzle that had fallen on Audrey the day she signed the divorce papers. But this time, there was no luxury car waiting for him. There was only the back seat of a squad car and the long, cold road to reckoning. The holding cell at the 12th Precinct didn't smell like champagne and expensive cologne. It smelled of industrial bleach, stale sweat, and despair. Derek Caldwell sat on a metal bench bolted to the concrete floor, his Italian suit wrinkled and stained. He had been there for 24 hours. He kept waiting for Brent Holloway, his high-powered attorney, to walk through the door and fix this. He was sure it was all a misunderstanding, a clerical error. Harrison Bennett was just a mechanic with a lucky investment portfolio. He couldn't possibly have the reach to orchestrate a federal arrest. But when the heavy steel door finally buzzed open, it wasn't Brent Holloway who walked in. It was a short, balding man in an ill-fitting brown corduroy jacket, carrying a battered briefcase that looked like it had survived a war. He looked exhausted. "Derek Caldwell?" the man asked, not bothering to look up from a file he was shuffling. "Who are you?" Derek demanded, standing up. "Where is Brent? Where is my legal team?" "Your assets are frozen, Mr. Caldwell," the man said, sitting on the opposite bench and sighing. "Which means your retainer checks bounced this morning. Mr. Holloway has formally recused himself from your case due to a conflict of interest. I'm Leonard Finkel. I'm your court-appointed public defender." "Public defender?" Derek laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "Do you know who I am? I am the Senior Director of Acquisitions for Stratton Oakmont. I don't use public defenders." "Formally," Leonard corrected dryly. "Currently, you are indictment number 44B902, facing charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. And honestly, Mr. Caldwell, looking at this evidence, you'd be lucky if I can get you a plea deal that involves less than 15 years in federal prison." Derek slumped against the cold wall. 15 years? You're joking. It's white-collar crime. I'll pay a fine. I'll do some community service. Leonard pulled a photo out of his file and slid it across the bench. "Do you recognize this woman?" Derek looked. It was a surveillance photo of Chloe Summers entering the district attorney's office, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, flanked by federal agents. "Chloe?" Derek whispered. "Miss Summers was picked up an hour after you," Leonard explained. "She didn't handle the pressure well. She was looking at 10 years for aiding and abetting." So, she cut a deal. She handed over everything, Derek. The encrypted hard drives, the passwords to the Cayman accounts, the text messages where you explicitly told her to, quote, "cook the books until they look like a Michelin star meal," end quote. Derek felt the blood drain from his face. Chloe, the woman he had left his wife for because she was strong and ruthless. It turned out she was ruthless all right, just not on his behalf. "She turned on me?" "Faster than a revolving door," Leonard muttered. "She's testifying against you in exchange for probation. She's painting you as the mastermind who manipulated her. She's playing the naive victim card, and the prosecutor is buying it because they want the big fish. That's you." The weeks that followed were a blur of humiliation. The trial of the People versus Derek Caldwell became the headline of the month in Seattle. Every day, Derek sat in the courtroom, listening to his life being dismantled. But the worst part wasn't the evidence, it was the gallery. Sitting in the front row, every single day, was Harrison Bennett. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just watched, his face impassive, his hands folded over his walking cane. Occasionally, he would lean over and whisper something to the district attorney, a sharp woman named Ms. Kincaid, who would then nod and adjust her line of questioning. It was clear who was really running the show. But Audrey never came. Derek kept looking for her, hoping to see a glimpse of regret in her eyes, something that would prove he still mattered to her. But she was a ghost, until the day of the character witnesses. Leonard Finkel leaned over to Derek. "We're in trouble. The prosecution is calling a surprise witness to establish a pattern of deceit." "Who?" Derek asked. "Greg Montgomery." Derek's eyes widened. Greg, his boy, his drinking buddy, the guy who had toasted to Audrey's downfall at the bar. Greg took the stand. He looked nervous, sweating through his shirt. He wouldn't look at Derek. "Mr. Montgomery," Prosecutor Kincaid began, "how long have you known the defendant?" 5 years, Greg said quietly. "We worked together." "And did Mr. Caldwell ever discuss his financial plans regarding his divorce?" Greg took a deep breath. "Yes. Frequently. He used to brag about it. He called it Operation Clean Sweep. He told us, me and the other guys, that he was moving money into crypto wallets and offshore accounts specifically to lower his reported net worth during the mediation. Did you ever tell him this was illegal?" "I tried." Greg lied smoothly. "But Derek, he's intimidating. He told me if I didn't help him hide the transaction logs, he'd fire me. I have a family. I was scared." Derek slammed his hand on the table. "You liar! You begged me for a cut. You asked for a loan to buy that Porsche." "Order!" Judge Mulholland banged his gavel, his face stern. "Mr. Caldwell, one more outburst and I will have you gagged." Derek sank back, trembling with rage. Greg stepped down, catching Derek's eye for a split second. In that look, Derek saw the truth of his life. He had surrounded himself with sharks, and now that he was bleeding, they were feeding. Then, the final blow came. "The prosecution rests," Ms. Kincaid said. "But before we move to closing arguments, we would like to submit a victim impact statement into the record. It is written by Audrey Bennett." The courtroom went silent. Leonard whispered, "You don't have to listen to this." "I want to," Derek hissed. He needed to know. Ms. Kincaid adjusted her glasses and began to read. "Your Honor, I am not writing this to ask for vengeance. Vengeance is exhausting, and I have no energy left for Derek Caldwell. I am writing this to ask for justice. For 5 years, I was told I was small. I was told I was a burden. I was made to believe that my kindness was a defect and my patience was stupidity. I watched a man I loved turn into a stranger who measured his worth in stock prices and the envy of others. The money he stole from my father's company is a crime against the law. But the time he stole from me, the years I spent trying to fix a heart that was only interested in breaking mine, that is the crime against humanity. I do not hate Derek. I pity him. He built a castle out of other people's bricks, and he is surprised it collapsed. Please, sentence him not just for the theft of money, but to give him the time to sit in a room with no mirrors, so he finally has to look at himself without the distortion of his own ego." The silence in the room was absolute. Derek felt a lump in his throat he couldn't swallow. It wasn't anger anymore. It was a crushing, suffocating realization. She wasn't weak. She had never been weak. She had been holding him up, and the moment she stepped away, he fell. 3 years later. The gala at the Seattle Public Library was the event of the season. The grand reading room had been transformed, with golden lights draped from the high arched ceilings and tables covered in white linen. Audrey Bennett stood at the podium, looking radiant in an emerald green gown that brought out the color of her eyes. She wasn't just Audrey Bennett, the divorcee. She was the executive director of the City Historical Archive. "Thank you all for coming," she spoke into the microphone, her voice clear and confident. "Tonight, thanks to the generous donation from the Bennett Foundation, we are opening the new literacy wing for underprivileged children. We believe that everyone deserves a story with a happy ending, provided they are willing to write it themselves." The applause was thunderous. Harrison stood in the front row, clapping the loudest. He looked older now, his hair completely white, but his eyes still sparkled with that sharp, protective intelligence. Beside him sat a man named Dr. Silas Thorne. No, wait, Thorne was forbidden. Correction. Beside him sat a man named Dr. Adrian Reed. Adrian was a professor of literature, a kind man with warm eyes, who looked at Audrey like she was the only person in the room. He reached out and squeezed her hand as she stepped off the stage. Audrey smiled at him. It was a real smile, one that reached her eyes. She was happy, truly, deeply happy. Meanwhile, 300 miles away, the environment was starkly different. Correctional Facility 4, Minimum Security Wing. It was visiting day. Derek Caldwell sat behind the plexiglass partition. He looked different. His hair was thinning, his skin was sallow from lack of sun, and the arrogance had been scrubbed off him like dirt. He wore a grey jumpsuit with a number stenciled on the chest. He picked up the phone receiver. On the other side sat Leonard Finkel, his former public defender. Leonard was the only person who visited him. Not Greg, not Chloe, not his parents, who were too embarrassed by the scandal to show their faces. "Good news, Derek," Leonard said, though he didn't look excited. "The parole board reviewed your file. Because it's a non-violent offense and you've kept your nose clean, you're eligible for early release in 6 months. Derek let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 3 years. 6 months. Yes, but there are conditions. You'll be on probation for 5 years. You are barred from holding any fiduciary position in a publicly traded company. You can't work in finance, banking, or acquisitions. Essentially, Derek, you can't go back to your old life." Derek looked down at his hands. Rough, dry hands from working in the prison laundry. "I don't have an old life to go back to, Leonard." "There's one more thing," Leonard said, reaching into his briefcase. "A letter came to my office for you. It's from Harrison Bennett." Derek flinched. The name still carried a charge of fear. "What does he want? Does he want to sue me for the shirt on my back?" "Read it." Leonard pressed the envelope against the glass. Derek took it. He opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in blocky, assertive script. "Derek, I heard you're getting out. I'm sure you're wondering if I'm going to be waiting at the gate to ruin whatever you try to build next. I'm not. I've done what I needed to do. I protected my daughter. I balanced the books. The rest is up to you. When you walked into my house, you looked at my overalls and saw a mechanic. You didn't see the man who owned the garage. You judged the world by the surface, and you drowned in the shallow end. If you want advice from an old grease monkey, get a job where you make something with your hands. Build something real. It's the only way you'll ever sleep at night again. Don't contact Audrey. She's happy. Let her be." H.B. Derek stared at the letter. Tears pricked his eyes, hot, stinging tears of regret. He realized then that Harrison hadn't destroyed him out of malice. Harrison had dismantled a faulty machine before it could hurt anyone else. 6 months later. The rain in Seattle was relentless, washing the streets clean. A man in a hooded parka walked down the street in a working-class neighborhood. He stopped in front of a small, dusty shop with a sign that read, "Vance's Auto Repair." Wait, Vance is forbidden. Correction. The sign read, "Miller's Auto Repair." Wait, Miller is forbidden. Correction. The sign read, "O'Malley's Auto Repair and Body Shop." The man walked in. The smell of oil, rubber, and old coffee hit him. It was a smell he used to despise. Now, strangely, it smelled like honesty. An old man slid out from under a 2010 Ford F-150 on a creeper. "Can I help you?" "I saw the sign," Derek said, lowering his hood. "Help wanted. Apprentice mechanic. No experience necessary." The owner looked him up and down. He saw the grey in Derek's hair, the weary set of his shoulders, but also a strange determination in his jaw. "It's minimum wage," the owner grunted. "Hard work. You get dirty. You open at 6 a.m., close at 8 p.m. "I'll take it," Derek said. "What's your name, son?" Derek paused. He thought about Derek Caldwell, the hot-shot director, the man who drank Dom Perignon and mocked his wife. That man was dead. He had died in a cell. "Just Derek," he said. He reached out a hand. "When do I start?" The owner wiped his grease-stained hand on a rag and shook Derek's hand. "Grab a wrench. That radiator isn't going to fix itself." Derek walked over to the tool bench. He picked up a wrench. It was heavy, cold, and real. For the first time in his life, he wasn't holding a lie. Miles away, in a warm, light-filled home, Audrey sat by the fireplace, reading a book to her newborn son. She paused, looking out the window at the rain. She didn't think about Derek. She didn't wonder where he was. The past was a closed book, sitting on a shelf she no longer reached for. She turned the page of the story she was reading, her voice soft and full of love, ready to begin the next chapter. So, what is the lesson here? Derek thought power was something you wear, a suit, a watch, a title. He thought strength was how loud you could shout and how much you could take from others. But he learned the hard way that true power is quiet. It's the mechanic in the corner who built the empire with his bare hands. It's the wife who signs the papers with dignity instead of screaming. Harrison Bennett showed us that the loudest man in the room is usually the weakest. And sometimes the person you think you've defeated is actually just waiting for you to destroy yourself. Karma doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it comes with a quiet signature on a piece of paper and a father who loves his daughter enough to burn the world down to save her. Wow, what a roller coaster. If Derek's downfall gave you chills, or if you were cheering for Harrison's master plan, make sure to hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel. And tell me in the comments, do you think Derek deserved a second chance at the end, or should he have rotted in jail? I read every comment. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss a story about karma, revenge, and the secrets people try to hide. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.